on YouTube. But today we're going to do an accelerated learning. If you're on our email newsletter, if you've been reading the articles that have been coming out lately, we've been spending a lot of time focusing on the topic of learning. And we see learning as the ultimate skill. It's a pathway to building all of these kinds of skills that we might want as we proceed into an increasingly unpredictable future. So we've been slowly revealing details about something we're calling accelerated learning experience. Will be led by a dear friend of ours at High Existence, Justin Nape. And I'm going to bring Justin on the camera here in just a minute. We've got some questions that people have sent in ahead of time. And we will also welcome your questions here today. If you want to chat, tell us where you're tuning in from, and feel free to ask your questions as they might be related to learning and skill acquisition, really anything. We're here making ourselves available to have an interesting. I'm going to bring Justin to get things started. Justin.
Hello. Hi. Thank you. It's fantastic to be had.
Yeah, I've been really excited about this. We got a few questions that came in, from the email list that I want to dig into. But before I begin, I was mentioning that you're going to be the instructor for this accelerated learning experience, and just tell us a bit about your background and why is that you're so fascinated with this subject of learning.
Sure. I think like everybody, it starts in school where your teachers tell you to do one thing and you're like, why am I doing this? What's the point of this? Are you sure this is the best way to do it? And, growing up and going through the education system, that wasn't the best. I wasn't in the best school in my area by any means. And seeing there were kids who were just a little bit richer. They were in a bit of a better school and they were doing stuff that was a year or 2 years above what I was doing. And I didn't like this. I didn't like thinking that I was dumber than these kids. I was like, this is the system, it's not me. So that started it. And then I kept getting everything in the class, but failing the exams. And it was really the study that was failing me. How do I put it in my brain? That was failing me, not did I understand. And so that was point number 2. And then after that, I became a teacher myself. I was English for over 15 years in different continents, as teaching for the and particularly specializing in a very, very strict exam syllabus that had a very low rate. And I just started finding a lot of success when we started tweaking things according to, what's the research? So it's really like a combination of all of these things, and just so. And then you go and you find the celebrities, people like Tim Ferriss, very famous for their accelerated learning pathways. So yeah, met him, loved his stuff for years, but still would disagree with some of them as well, some of his points.
Yeah, and that's one thing, as I've had many discussions with you as we've been scheming and plotting for what this experience will be, the accelerated learning experience, and just noticing the rigor you're drawing on so many different psychological models to help explain and describe the experiences that people have, to help ground it in a way where, this isn't, what I was considering as an error or something was working improperly, actually was working exactly how it ought to be working, given what the human is doing, and here's some ways to tweak it and make it work better for you, and these kinds of things. So we're going to talk about memory and the emotional relationships, social relationships, learning, all kinds of things. Before I dip my toes in there, I just want to remind people, if you have a question, feel free to submit it in the chat wherever it is that you're watching this. And I want to just take a moment to the real learning at this particular point in time. Whether you're wanting to move to a new country and get immersed in a new culture, have to learn a new language, or you're wanting to advance your career, or even shift careers entirely and go into a different direction. What's going to make or break your ability to successfully make those transitions is your ability to learn. And there are ways to approach learning that you've never been taught that can make all of your energy invested into learning become, much. You just get way more return for the amount of energy that you put in. So that's part of what we're focusing on here today. And that doesn't even get into the byproduct, the secondary effects of being someone who is invested in a process themselves, what that can open up for someone on the emotional level. So I will, dig up a question here. So let's see. One that I thought is interesting, because learning is something to think about if you're young or if you're old. But we had, if you're young, so for exams, or I'm wanting to get this certification for this career, or the alternative is, I'm aging and I'm feeling my faculties decline. How do I improve? So let me, bring this. We had a question. Someone's memory is starting to fade. And so, at the age of 64, I face loss of vocabulary and ideas that I've had before. I know it's a natural process, but I want to know if there's a remedy. Asking, if you are aging and you're starting to notice, my memory is starting to decline, what are approaches someone can take to restore some of that functioning?
So it's a very typical question that I get a lot, actually, because the people who are more interested are the people who are older. Because like you said, the people who are younger doing exams, they can't imagine having time to set aside for learning. They're just like, I'm so busy studying for exams. So I do tend to attract that type of population as well, where they're like, help me to stop this memory decay. So the first thing that I say to them is, it's a very unnatural process. It's your system is out of harmony. Usually you have a buildup of a certain protein in the brain from lifestyle, sometimes from genetics, that if you get rid of that, this X amount of a chemical in you fire faster. Even talking about that, the second point comes in. Has received an education on how to train the memory, on how to train the brain, and cognitive fitness in general. And what you find is no one's really received training. And even the training that's out there is like rudimentary training. It's the basic stuff. It's if you do this, then you will do that. So flashcards, for example. Cards are 5 minutes. Good studying. People think doing Sudoku is them keep their memory later in years, but it's not the truth. Actually, the truth of the matter is that good patients of what can you do, or muscle exercise, you just maintain your memory. So there's too many to go into right now, but there are. So one of the big things that you can do is try and take on new experiences, because new experiences will connect a whole range of new things to old things that exist and fire up the brain's existing memory. Okay, so that's point number one. Point number two, actually, people try to put things in their memory, or they don't use their memory purposefully. That's the best way I can say it. So forgetting 1 or 2 words a week, that's quite normal. But forgetting multiple words throughout your week, that's a problem. So the idea very, very specifically is if we say, here's an example. It's not vocabulary, it's placing down my keys. I always lose my keys. Where did I put my keys? People always go to after the action, the putting of the keys. And they say, I can't remember where my keys. What you do more before the action, which is my keys on this table right now. I'm going to take a mental picture. I'm talking to myself. I remember where I put my. I always put my keys here. That the location of keys is something that is not a problem anymore. So the same vocabulary. If there's a word that leaves your memory, pay special attention to it. exercise it, try and use it in different sentences, make it your word for the week. And you'll start to notice that higher level vocabulary that you haven't used will leave. And that, whereas vocabulary that you use, and the problem with that, well, then take it out, play with it, dust it off, examine it, find a way to enjoy that vocabulary as well. So it's connecting a little bit more intention to doing emotions, as well as a little bit more variety, a little bit more context.
Awesome. Yeah, I love the piece around supplementing novelty. Is the way that I heard it. It's like having these little doses of novelty that you can ingest. Because I remember my grandmother, she's 102 years old, remarkable woman, but she was doing Sudokus, and that's what she was told. Feels that there's a lot of misinformation about how to kind of maintain these things. And I think it may have been the traveling that she was doing in her later years was probably a greater contributor to longevity of the circuitry than number games on a pen and paper. That's what I'm hearing, at least.
Absolutely, without a doubt. But it's not that it's there's bad information out there. There's a kind of cultural conditioned information history that's out there. And before the 90s, before we really started doing research where we did brain scans to actually see, is it true or not true? Can we actually figure it out? A lot of it worked. Now shifts, we can see effect kind of things, but we still are not sure about exactly why these mechanisms work like this or what are the fine points. So is to learn mind, say, oh, this is going to have less of an impact than this. Start to measure and kind of create a hierarchy of what's good for the brain and what's not so great for the brain.
Got it. Well,
Sudoku is not up there.
Not up there.
Put it this way: in one study, they found that taking a walk and having a good, heartwarming conversation with a friend is more. The word now I've lost the word. It's more engaging than Sudoku.
Got it. Engaging, yeah. That makes sense. Sometimes I'll go for walks, but to nowhere in particular, trying to discover or explore, new places. And I've lived in the same place for 7 years. And just the other day I was, walking around discovering new facets. There's always more, it feels like there is to uncover. So, that's another thing, people, if they're listening to this, especially if you're somewhere weather is nice, not get outside, and you don't have to travel. You don't have to get on an airplane to see something new. You know what I mean? So I'm going to pull up a question here that we've got, let's see, from our dear friend, John Brooks. It doesn't look like it shows the entire question, but I'll read it off. What if the goal was not mere learning, but to instead become truly world-class at something? What is the process to go from excellent to elite? So this question sounds like more for high performers, someone who, they're already made progress. They're developing, capacity, maybe like has with, and they really want to take it to that next level. What do you say to those people, those high achievers?
So it's incredibly interesting. A good way to think structure athletes. If we talk about world class with the brain, with the skill, let's talk about athletics. You've got your regular gym goers, right? People who go to the gym should develop a broad range of abilities. And then after that, you get advanced specialized training for you. Then after that, you can get sports specific training. And then after that, you can get event specific training. So you're in the big muscle groups, let's say push pull or whatever. When they get advanced training, it's to bring up certain weaknesses or strengths or to hit particular goals. Then we have sports specific training. And then after you would have event. So with specific training, we're talking like football training. So you're going to exercise in the gym, you're going to get specific exercises like sprinting or whatever. And then after that, you can get all skills, correlations around that type of thing. And then an event-specific training would be, say, training to play one particular team that you know their strengths and weaknesses. So to become world-class at something, you're looking at building this type of structured approach to your training as well. So let's imagine that you want to become a world-class surgeon. Let's take John's example of world-class to a general base level of skills which are highly transferable. You've got specialized, a little bit more specialized skill for particular scenarios. After that, you'll have sports-specific skills as well. So in this case, that's the level where we would start introducing very, very specialized Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, gi or no gi, on your back or whatever. That type of training would kick in at that point in time because we're doing general BJJ drills, then specialized BJJ drills for certain situations. We can also have supplementary work, physical, and then after that, being able to put it together. But in this case, let's focus just on the information. To become world-class at something is the idea not of peak performance, but of effortless performance. So I'm not a fan when people talk about peak. You've got performance. If you are able to perform a move or a partner's moves, because for you, this is like breathing. It's like swimming in water when you're a child. You can do it without thinking. Training your body or training a skill to get to a place of no thinking takes time. And if you are not at that point, class, it fails. Very specifics, the minutia of a movement, then you are not world class. A quick example is everybody knows push-ups. Everybody can do a push-up. But to get minutia to arms as if they were on a dinner plate, but your hand doesn't actually, but it feels like you're generating a torque in your arm. And when you go down, what is the depression of the scapula to create a very stable shoulder girdle? For you to understand all the minutia of that and execute it effortlessly would be class. Everybody freaks out and be like, but I don't want to get world class, or like that's just a path to take. But the major neurological benefits will happen before you see a performance result. Just you trying to understand something, you trying to embody it, your neural networks will just reconfigure themselves to bring this new information in. And so literally neuroplasticity will happen before you actually see a good performance. You'll still look like an amateur, but because you've been an amateur for a certain period of time, you'll be familiar with these beginner traits. So you have what you call beginning. That is when you get to that world-class level, there's no new information. There's literally a training for performance to make that performance effortless. And there's a lot of stuff that you can do based on stress training specifically. So one of my favorite things, if you've got an iPhone, I believe the app is DAF Phonate, DAF Phonate, or if you've got an and what it does is it delays whatever you're saying 300 microseconds or whatever, or milliseconds, and it plays it back to you, and it actually stops you from speaking because your feedback loop is so delayed. It's kind of like talking on a bad connection line. It stops the conversation. And try and just read something with those in your ears, and you'll notice how quickly your brain will shut you down when your brain is stressed. And that's what we're trying to negate.
Still there, Justin? Oh, there you are. Yeah, so great. I love that. I think I've seen viral videos of people trying those things, and while it's going on in their ears, and it's just very, just like destabilizing. So it sounded like the things are breaking up with the connection. So whenever I field a question, I'll just turn off my video, and hopefully that will keep things running more smoothly. But I want to get into one of these other questions we received. I think this one is interesting because someone's saying they have absorbed a large amount of information and skills in recent years, but in a rather haphazard manner. They're self-employed, have a wide variety of around a central theme that is a better all. My one question would be how to tie it all together coherently and do something new with it while being dependent on my career or my current work for making a living. So I love learning new things and could happily spend my days reading and chatting about the wonderful ideas, but I'm increasingly feeling the need to act, implement, to create. Does that make sense, what I'm asking?
Absolutely. I think so. Do you want to? Yeah, I think it does. I was going to ask you to reread the question.
Yeah. So
yeah, let's go for that.
The core thrust is how do they take their sort of the amassed skills that they've developed in a haphazard way, and they want to tie it together and do something with it. Like it feels like they want to make better use of an existing base of skills that feel disparate and disconnected, and tie it together into a coherent whole, and begin to use that. We don't need to get necessarily into how do I transition and work that's related to what the spirit of the question is getting into the connectivities that might, and how to leverage those.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, I think when you I stopped getting feedback, and that's when I'm wondering, do we have the connection? So that's
okay.
all. So
yeah.
If the feedback is lost, then I'll just check the connection and be like, yo. All right. So to answer this question, it's
remember I'm turning off.
I'm
turning off my camera when you go to answer the questions to try and keep the stream.
Okay, but that's the microphone off as well. That's what I'm asking.
My microphone.
Okay, that's fine. So I'll just talk and
you'll see me again when I'll jump in.
Okay, all right. So I mean, it's a very normal question, because when we want to learn, we have such fear with it. It's below our passion. So really, what I find is, how can I bring more of the skills that I've learned through my passions into my work? This type of thing just takes combination. Think about cooking, and each of your skills is a small ingredient in a recipe, but you still need to decide on what dish you want to cook. So if you already have a job, if you already have a practice, a business practice that brings you money, and you want to add to that, then by all means, find a way of combining those. The results of the skills are normally what people think is the fundamental skill itself, but it's not. So for example, the Rubik's Cube, like, how can I bring the Rubik's Cube into my business? It's a skill I've acquired. I know how to do a Rubik's Cube. Well, actually, what you've learned how to do is execute things according to a sequence. You've learned how to orientate three-dimensional space, create certain phase for sequencing particular phase.
And I lost your mic. I don't know if your microphone was disconnected. Still can't hear you now.
How's that?
There it goes.
Okay. So yeah, I think that microphone died.
Well, it's
Okay.
working well now.
Okay. So what I was saying was that being able to do a skill in particular, what is the real sequence that's going on in your brain with that skill? And being able to put it together into an offering or something like that is thinking about the metaphor of cooking with various ingredients and then bringing that need to, and this is something that the Center for Brain Health out of University of Texas in Dallas talks about as well as one of the biggest skills of the brain is things that doesn't matter. There's also where a pilot talks to Warren Buffett and says, I want to do all these things. How do I know what I want to do? And he's like, well, make a list of 25 things that you want to do. And he's like, yeah. And he's like, so the top 5 things. He's like, yeah, oh, you want me to focus most of my time in those and then a little bit of extra time on the other 20. He's like, no, completely cut out the other 20. The other 20 are going to suck your energy, suck everything out, focus on one. And the 4 that are closest to that top priority are the most dangerous. So with regard to like, I want to bring in skills, I want to be more creative. What I find is actually it depends on your customer, who you're serving, and how your skills can actually benefit them. Because that normally brings fulfillment, and that brings a lot of creativity, and it allows you a chance to actually express previous skills. So for example, if you learned how to do art on a particular program, some kind of like computer design program, offering that to a client. If they don't want it, then that's fine. Don't push it. Don't say it has to be in this package. So there are ways of being able to bring these skills together where it elevates your own client more than clear on how do I put it all together with me. Put out your feelers. Test it. The number one part of the brain that's going to engage in as much as possible is going to be the social brain. And actually, use it to your community, to your client. I've got a certain level of proficiency. And so, I'd even hesitate to say measure your proficiency and see what it is that you can offer. But I'll tell you from experience that usually it doesn't matter. Just the fact that you've shown interest in something is enough to award, for a client to see you in a different light. So tricky without knowing the full context, without really, but I know that I myself have this problem of being able to bring everything together into like a unified whole. And I think that one of the big social aspect.
I love that. Yeah, I think the cooking analogy is really a great way of describing it. And for me, I've learned that some of you may know that I've been a magician for many years. Justin, you and I have talked about this, and I find that skill set isn't directly to what I do day to day, but there are undergirded patterns that are relevant. Being able to some of it now, I'm on camera and development to this that is not unlike what it might be to perform a magic trick. And there is understanding things beneath the surface in a magic trick that goes into how I understand the way media and the web works and these kinds of things. So there's like patterns that I learned in these other kinds of skills that they're not like directly applicable. I'm not performing magic over here, but there's some component piece of it that's relevant in sort of subtly different contexts. So that was my way of kind of adapting, some of what I was hearing you. And now I want to ask this.
Jump on Ed.
Yeah, go ahead.
If I can just piggyback quickly on what's said, it's a perfect example because let's say you're performing a sleight of hand trick. So just standing or self that you're performing the two, and let's say your sleight of hand is that you're actually hiding something in this crease in your thumb, but it's on the back of your hand. So when you show the person, it's like this. you need to know your orientation. It's not about the trick. It's like, how am I understanding this three-dimensional perspective and orientating? How am I misdirecting this person as well at the same time?
Mhm.
Like the fake thumb part, whenever people have the thumb and the other, and they'll do this, and they'll be like, see, there's nothing in my hands. And they normally like will hide thumb just a little bit obscured behind the other hand.
Justin, if you
So
keep revealing secrets, the Magicians Guild is going to come.
I mean, the material, right?
No, these are circle.
It's okay.
These are secrets
I
that
have
we
immunity.
send out there to kind of head fake people. It's like, oh, that's a secret. It's not really a secret.
It's a misdirection.
Yeah, it's another layer of misdirection. But I want to ask about because we're talking about the subject of learning, and we speak to how this is the ultimate skill, and because it gives so much leverage, apply it in all these different domains in one's life. And I think it's a really interesting question when you apply it to another domain that also has a lot of leverage and has a lot of kind of power in the way that we show up in the world, and that is the domain of emotions. And so I'm really wanting to explore where these things connect. And one of the questions, it was more of like an intention, just kind of wanting to master empowering feelings. This was the language that and one way of my shaping of that question is, how do I proceed through my days remaining uplifted, and when I'm not feeling uplifted, how do I do that? And then also, like, particularly as this is related to learning, what's the synergy, what's the dynamism between emotional states and learning capacity? Just curious whatever kind of thoughts emerge for you there.
Okay, so there's two ideas or two principles. The first one is got to do with emotions are usually fleeting. I'm not too sure if the person talking about this wanted to say that certain emotions are better than other emotions. I don't have this belief. I do have a belief that an emotion is an appropriate response. Any emotion is an appropriate response to a particular context. Not crying or thinking about when somebody dies. Usually the reason is because you're numb. You're not necessarily elated. There's going to be a mix and a fluctuation of emotions, a whole harmony, and experiencing them is really part of being human. And it's not about avoiding or bypassing or neglecting emotions. It's the same as if you experience depression, and that depression is just like a latte on this, but the idea is that it'll pass. You'll have that, you'll savor it for what it is, and you will allow it to pass. So the idea of permanence and temperance is important with emotions, and particularly with learning. You can't just turn on learning whenever you want. I know we like to think that we can, but if you're tired, good luck. Your learning is going to be suboptimal. I would say sleep first and then go back to learning. So people who are cramming for an exam and they stay up late at night cramming for the exam, your performance in that exam is going to be suboptimal, despite the cramming, where sleep would have served you better. So it comes back to the idea that fantastic. Number, all emotions will pass and serve you. Something that's constantly presenting. This person has to now. It's going to be something temporary. That's a good thing. But then number two is that if it's a hardwired response of your nervous system, that's an issue. And to see and make a comparison of like, how often am I feeling this? Am I feeling like this negative emotion? Let's say it's anger, depression, whatever, sadness. Am I feeling this out of context? When I should be happy, I'm feeling angry or sad or depressed. If you're feeling it inappropriate, number one, if problem to a professional, give you the personalized service that you right? But number two is understanding that there's nothing wrong with you. It's a practiced response. Your nervous system has just repeated these responses. And when we learn, we actually practice the same thing. We follow the same nervous system conditioning where we're going to do it until it feels right. So one of the biggest things that I get is when people have to learn something new, let's say a dance move or a they say doesn't feel natural, and I say to the client, of course it's not going to feel natural. You've never done it before. If it felt natural, you wouldn't need me. I wouldn't be here. The idea of like we put ourselves into a place where we're happy to feel uncomfortable, and this is where we tie it in with learning. You need to approach it with this idea of I'm going to suck, but I'm going to suck and enjoy the movement from suck to no suck. And then from suck to no suck to fantastic or better or whatever it is. And there's a great idea in here that's called risk intelligence. It's a TED talk by a guy, I believe his name was Dylan Evans. He great talk about, and so let's by talking say that with risk intelligence, if you are overconfident, you are just as likely to lose money on the stock market as if you are modest or underconfident. The best way to do it is to have a certain probability and be as accurate as you can be with a probability. Now, that will mean that your risk intelligence is high because you know what is the probability of this task being achieved. So people who are super confident, people who are underconfident, will both of them experience failure in these cases. And this is why we put a feedback loop into the learning process as well, because this also will negate a lot of emotions. And this is what I feel is the number one benefit of learning how to learn, is to not take things too seriously. So you start trying to lose the winter weight or whatever, you take a picture of yourself, and this is what you are like right now. These are your abilities. This is your performance. And that's not to put yourself down and stick it on the fridge and say, I don't want this anymore. It's just to say, this is where I'm starting from. Then you practice, practice, practice. You take another photo, and you can get a measurement of how effective all of your actions have been. And once you've done that a certain amount of times, it stops hurting emotionally. You start adjusting to that. It stops being painful. You're just like, this is another part of the process. So that feedback loop allows you to just say that if you train Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, let's say, the first time somebody takes you to the ground, you might feel this explosion of emotions of like anger and hurt. But after a year of being taken to the ground every day, it changes and you're like, this is normal, this is fine. You know, your body stops panicking, your emotions don't respond. And so it's just this idea of getting used to that feedback loop, increases our ability confidence in ourselves. And I can go into a situation and say, I could learn probably in 2 hours. Based on my past experience, I have a certain amount of built up knowledge. And only with future experience and feedback am I going to keep that probability confidence very stable. And so this brings in emotions as well, where if you learn a language that you will never need, you can take that experience, that confidence, those measurements, and apply it to something that you very much need. So if you learned what are the 10 most popular countries in the world and exactly all of their numbers and test it yourself, it really affects the world, but that allows you to be a lot more stable, confident, and also potentially a lot more happy with your results. So when you go I need you to learn the program. If you want to continue working here, you need this certification. You don't jump away from that saying like, I don't want to learn a new thing. Oh my gosh, my work is so stressful. Of like, take a look. Oh, okay, yeah, let's do that. That'll be quick. And it's more the attitude, the confidence, the emotion that feeds into the community at work, as well as, of course, your boss seeing that you're just a happy-go-lucky kind of person who can also achieve and get done what needs to get done. So there's a lot more in it than just, oh, I know how to learn. I could, read Swahili if I needed to.
Absolutely makes sense. Yeah, one of the things that jumped to mind as I was listening to you was really highlighting this piece around impermanence and this too shall pass. These kinds of dispositions related to emotions. Otherwise, emotional recursion, it's easy for that to happen where it's just about your anxiety, depressed about your depression, it's just like worse and worse and worse because it's like the emotions are like feeding, that kind of loop.
Right.
Whereas giving it the space to be as it is and not fueling further into it can actually, create the soil through which you can start to pass. We'll want to bring up this question.
I love the metaphor.
Yeah. So we have Detoxic Soul asking us, my question is how thoughts while learning something new. I keep on getting thoughts train of new ideas. So yeah, so sounds like distracted avenues while trying to learn something and put about this.
Yeah, man. I was the president of this club for many years, and the complete situation is having the ratio what's going on here to what side. So I talked about this previously in one of my Instagram posts, one of my IGTV videos, if people want to get a little bit more into detail on this. And I talked about this saying you should have a thinking to action to feedback ratio of 1 to a minimum of 5 to 1, or ultimately it should be a 1 to 9 to 1. So let's say if I spend 10 minutes planning about something, then I should spend 90 minutes experimenting, trying, writing it down, embodying this, like actually doing the physical actions that I need to do. So even my wife just finished her degree and she was writing her dissertation. And I said, print out your dissertation, put it up on the wall, make a grid, get post-it notes, put them everywhere. What did you do that you needed to change? What did you need to manipulate? And your brain can then see different colors, it sees size. It can go from macro perspective to a micro perspective to a section perspective, a meso perspective. And do this just by putting it up. She had to organize it in her head. Just by seeing it physically in front of her like that, it started to structure in her head. Versus if it was on a screen and she could only see a partial page at a time of a 60-page document, it's no good. So spending the time to actually make it physical, it's incredible. It's incredible what happens. So you're studying, you don't need to perform a skill, but still reformulating it, drawing flow charts, putting colors on it, spending that amount of time on something will actually help process it a lot more. And keep away that separate thoughts, because they're like 9 parts of execution. And then after that, you've got one part of feedback to see what part of the execution actually worked the best for you. What part of the execution was actually very painful or you think had little return on investment. So it's that ratio of 1 to 9 to 1 is my recommendation. And of course, when you reflect on this, you can maybe take a look and see, actually, I prefer a 1 to 10 to 2, or maybe I prefer a 2 to 5 to 1. But getting that ratio is always the key to getting out of your head. And that's what most people have, is they're too focused in their heads. They don't want to pull the trigger. The 30th once. And in cuts, they're going to make mistakes because they haven't cut enough. And their brain is second guessing things and trying to take in new ideas. And no, get your ratios correct first. So whenever you try and do something, just have a certain amount of practice in it. Because I know I'm a problem with this as well, and the feedback loops that you get from actually being, physical with whatever it is that you're trying to do will prove to be the most valuable point. Without those feedback loops, you're going to stay in this realm of the brain, and you'll notice emotions coming out of that of overconfidence, underconfidence, second guessing yourself, all kinds of things.
Yeah, I've often wondered about how the transition to digital with our, the way that we file things away and, have everything in, discrete notes, when before, it would be, files and books stacked up. Now all that consolidated in the same thing that people do, their time wasting activities, scrolling on social media, Netflix binging happens, kind of in the same container. And years ago, I started this project of cap cards and then putting them in this little box. And I'd have like different like ways of filing and moving through them. And I, think that's what I was thinking of as you're describing this, because that whole process started to give rise to, I can like lay these things out and look at them. And now I'm starting to see patterns that didn't exist before that I wouldn't have realized if I had just written it on a note, and never looked at it again, or even put it in a journal. Somehow having these discrete, modular, physical objects that are, pegs, ideas, were helping my brain kind of connect to things that, I wasn't able to connect, otherwise. So it just brings, begs the question, we have all these advanced note-taking methods inside of computers. There might be, other ways that the physical needs to be brought in.
Research around this type of stuff as well. And the best thing that I can say is it's the action. So note-taking when you're typing on a computer versus note-taking with your pen. Pen, I would much more recommend that. It's much more engaging for the mind. Whereas typing would get you more accurate notes. But let's say you're a typer, but then still spending some time making your notes really look good, like putting in little pictures here and there that you've copy and pasted, right? But if you were actually doodling in a notebook next to those notes rather than looking in Google, that's going to be better. But still, both options, the actions of you actually embodying whatever it is you're trying to learn, is going to have more of an effect than not doing anything. So it's there's something called embodied cognition, which is that the brain isn't just in the head. Your nervous system permeates your entire body. Mm-hmm. So anytime that you participate with a subject, try and use your entire body. So walking around while you're reading, pacing back and forth, engaging, just looking backwards and forwards while you're thinking can help you think better. So there's so much.
Yeah, that brings up, what's going to happen when everyone has access to virtual reality, or what are the ways we can use the digital medium interface to begin to resemble the physical world in a way that even carries with it through reality software or things like that. We can get into a whole kind of, what do you got?
I will tell people this. What was it? It was Google Brush. I think it was.
Brush. Yeah.
Brush. Oh my. So if people haven't experienced this, please go and Google it. Go and look on YouTube. But the painting thing. So I can literally paint a circle in the air in front of me by doing this, like a nice spiral. And being able to take something like a picture and being able to make it three-dimensional, or try to paint a house three-dimensional. I mean, it blows your mind what you can create. And that type of 3D visual spatial simulation is actually something that's the same as like building Legos. It stimulates the brain in such a way. And with virtual reality, there's no cleanup. So there are ways of engaging the mind. A large part of our brain is sensory. So to have something that I can touch. So I always recommend people get a whiteboard with multiple colors. But if they have a choice, get a pin board instead, that they can pin objects three-dimensional. And then having string that they can tie things to as well, because now we've got different textures as well. And you'll be surprised CEOs are my clients, multi-million-dollar, multi-conglomerate companies that follow what I say and find fantastic results. Like just changing the size of a notebook from a small travel size one to a bigger one, and it has colors in one. All of a sudden, their notes in a meeting, but they don't need to look at their notes to remember the information. Their brains are now fired up. So there's so much about being able to manipulate what are the major trigger points in the brain to just take the same action to get a better result.
Love it. I'm going to bring up a question from Daniel we have here. Let's see. All right, it cough a bit, but I'll read it out. So how do I find the things I want to after a long day at an 8 to 6 job? I'm exhausted, but would like some more motivation to do what I want. And this connects to another question someone asked related to motivation. So I think, there's some real interesting stuff to unpack around this subject here.
This kind of ties back into our previous things on effortless performance as well as the emotional things. The easiest, after a long day, if I ask you to sit down and watch Titanic, how would you feel about that, Mike? A long day, you're tired, you're not motivated, and I say, let's watch Titanic. Where's your brain at?
I'm not. I mean, I could get through it. It is very kind of disengaged, passive activity. Titanic wouldn't be the movie.
And then goes in a specific that I say to you, 5 days of the week, Monday to Friday, after your 8 to 6 job, come home and we're going to watch Titanic every night after you finish.
Oh man, sounds thrilling.
Oh, yeah, right. But now, I'm sure there's somebody somewhere that's like, I love Titanic. That's my favorite movie to put on. And the difference in energy there, it's very easy for you to stay focused and motivated with something that really sets you up. It's very difficult to find that with something that you just reject. Point number one, and I think this is the most powerful, is to be able to transplant passion, energy from one topic that you are absolutely in love with to another thing. So usually what this means is try and first find out what you're super passionate about. What can you do for hours and without needing? So if you come home from an 8 to 6 job and you're like, I can't focus. Well, what can you focus on after 8 to 6? If you can't focus on absolutely anything, I would say you haven't tried enough things to find out what you can do effortlessly. Also, another point to say is maybe you don't have energy because there's a lot of stuff that's going on that you need to take care of. What does your exercise look like? What does your sleep look like? What does your nutrition look like? That energy, I was one included because I didn't eat enough stuff that gave me nutrition. It's just eat real foods. Stop eating stuff that's out of a box. Eat more vegetables, eat as clean as you can, really, and avoid sugar and gluten. Those two things will interfere with how your brain thinks, your clarity of thought. So it's not that I'm saying avoid sugar in general because it's really bad for your body and it's unrealistic. It's just, if you want to focus, stay away from the sugar. So a whole host of activities that you can do, physical energy. But physical energy isn't the be-all and end-all. I would actually argue that emotional energy, so transplanting whatever energy it is, let's say you want to start up a business of your own and you just don't know where to start, coming up with a sequence of like, what do I enjoy doing? Well, I enjoy, let's say like John, doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Well, then do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and start conversations with people who run businesses. Start socializing with people who do businesses. Socializing usually isn't a problem for most people. So let's say, worst case scenario, this person plays Call of Duty 6 hours a night. Call of Duty normally has an interactive part where you can talk to people and get them to spend 5 minutes of the time speaking about business, because then you'll start to get excited about it. You'll start to transplant those feelings for whatever it is that you are already doing onto what it want comes from fun, right amount of challenge. And so transplanting the fun emotion onto it allows you to then take a measured look and saying, what do I want to do? Okay, what are the small bites that I can take? So the measured piece gives you the appropriate amount of challenge. And so based on that, we've got challenge plus positive emotions, joy emotions, fun. Connected together, you're going to find a lot of energy out of you. Not just about spiritually, physically, you'll notice chemicals shoot up. We're talking about norepinephrine, we're talking about dopamine. You know, those two are the big ones. Challenge will bring that adrenaline rush and be like, oh, to the point where you won't be able to sleep, which is maybe like, okay, I'm going to wake up early and do this instead of doing it when I get home. That is my third and final thing to say about this, is that perhaps when you get home, you're right, there's a whole host of things. This fatigue. You noticed that people's concentrations will go down depending on how many temptations they had to say no to throughout the day. So if you're working from home and you got that Call of Duty controller next to you, like, yeah, that's going to be a big problem for you because you constantly look at it and see, no, I'm going to be focused. People who are successful at focusing are people who can remove temptation from their mind. So try activities that excite you, that you do together, job is, whatever your focus, so that you don't think about the temptations, the tempting things. And in this way, you don't have decision fatigue. So you could just shift whatever it is that you're trying to do to the morning as well, and shift it so that at the beginning of your day, where you have the most energy, you can do what you're trying to do, and then just do your job as normal, go home and rest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one of the things that I think of is, implicit in the question, those hours, from 8 to 6 of the job are sort of treated as dead time, where learning does not occur. But there's a whole window territory that applications can be made, rehearsal and trying things. Well, it really depends on the relevance of the skill. But say, for instance, someone's wanting to learn how to communicate better, and they're expanding their vocabulary. Oh, okay, with my today, word a number of times, creating a game for yourself inside of the context of work, where you can not just treat that time as dead time, but use it to play with the other dynamics that you're working on when you're not there at work. So there can be this bouncing effect. So
I think people also so focus states of the brain, based on the research, you shouldn't really be doing more than 90 minutes per day, because then it's really hyper focus, and there are consequences for being that focused all the time. You'll put your body into an agitated stress state. You've got too many of particular hormone groups in blood, and negative consequences, stomach ulcers, high blood pressure, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But likewise, if you're on the other side of the spectrum, where you've got different ingredients running around in blood, if you're completely like, a great thing either. So trying to find a harmony between all these brain states, deep sleep, light sleep, REM sleep, we need all of these states to really serve its purpose. And just like we need parts of your day where you're not really engaged, you're just doing the mundane, but then parts of your day where you're super engaged, where you're super focused, where you're not focused on one thing, but you're doing multiple things at once, and you're managing this kind of dynamic situation, like a chef in a kitchen. You don't need to think about how you place the tray in the oven, and be so focused. You can put it in with one hand while you're turning off, the gas on with your other hand. You can reach these points, but it's the ratio. You can't do that for 16 hours a day. Just like you can't focus for 16 hours a day. It's a good idea to break these up. Go outside, get some exercise, drink some water, get away from the screen, take a walk, whatever you need to do, but break up these states and understand that there are multiple states for the brain to be in. And maybe at the end of the day, you've just used too much of that concentration, which means stay focused in that until it becomes a little bit less challenging, a little bit more effortless. And then you'll have a lot more time to focus at the end of the day.
I love that. Yeah, this idea that, we can be, completely focused and for obscene amounts of time just is unrealistic. I like that perspective of, approaching those hours of, oh, I've got these 90 minutes and I'm going to use them effectively. I'm not going to use them going through my email. I'm going to use them in a way that I to making progress. I'm going to do some really creative writing with this time or something like that. So I like thinking about that. And someone asked about, accelerated learning techniques, and we're coming up, past an hour here. So then we're going to wrap up here briefly, but I just want to take some time to mention what we've been putting together with the accelerated learning experience. If you're someone who wants to learn techniques and strategies for accelerated learning, we've put together a really cool experience, and it's multifaceted. So Justin boiled down his process into a 5-phase sequence that you can go through and use and apply pretty much across the board. If there's anything that you're trying to learn, these deep principles will digest, metabolize the information into your use and basically move towards the path of mastery. So when we open the doors to the accelerated learning experience, and you're going to see a little bit more details in the coming days, but there is this foundational course that walks you through that process, and it will also spell out this. If I want to learn music, I want to learn language, I want to draw. There's also bonuses related to memory, enhancing and increasing our memory. And then one thing that we're really excited about is the live learning. So you're going to show up on a live interactive call, where you're going to bring something you want to learn, and we're going to help you through the process of actually applying it and making progress over the course of a couple of days. So there's going to be more details. We could talk about it, for hours about all the intricacies and the nuances. But one other thing is, maybe a question to leave on because it's relevant to what we get in the course. Someone asked, does meditation have an effect on learning? And, one of the things, maybe you can tell them a bit about the bonus meditation that we're doing for people as a way to that question.
Absolutely. So the meditation question is interesting because if you are in a negative state, learning turns down, all markers of cognition turn down. So the types of breathing that has been shown to actually decrease stress and increase your cognition is going to be a skewed resonance breathing. So the meditation that's in there as well. But basically the idea is breathing rhythm, a calm breathing rhythm will help your mind focus. It's not take a deep breath. It's not that. It's got to be take multiple deep breaths at the same speed, at the same pace for a sustained period of time to actually see your heart rate become very stable and your heart rate variability actually increase, which is good. And increased heart rate variability is good. So does work with this. But I would give a little bonus here for people who are engaged in the live that I haven't really talked about before, which is reflection. Thinking about a topic and being able to look at the big picture and then zoom in on small parts and think about the big picture. What did I enjoy? Any kind of reflection meditation that you're doing that's connected with your learning or just connected in general to anything will really help you to put all the puzzle pieces in place. Very often we don't do that. We need to go, learn more. And consider that just a reflection meditation is like digesting food. Just sit and let it happen. Sit and just allow that information to rattle around in your brain And you'll notice that your brain will put it in the right places by itself. A lot of what the brain does is without our choice anyway. And so a reflection meditation, just sitting inside for 15 minutes is enough. If you wanted to close your eyes and focus particularly on these things, it's just allowing the dust to settle. Kind of like there was that meditation, or I think it was Alan Watts who did it, where he said if you take water and you put some sand in it and you mix it up, it's all hazy. But if you just allow it to sit, don't add more water, just allow it to sit for a certain amount of time, the water will become clear. All the sediment will settle to the bottom. And that's like a really, really big help with meditation. Literally go and lie on the grass, looking at the sky, and just allow your mind to wander in topic and that topic. Lots of little questions. What would happen? I wonder if people have thought about this before. Allowing your brain to literally just walk through that environment.
Amazing. I might have to go and lay in the grass after this.
Hey.
Awesome. Well, we're here up past an hour. Justin, great to have you, answer these questions. I'm sure people will be, excited to listen back. And for those of you who are interested in learning more the Accelerate experience, go to highexistence.com/learnfast, where you can get those details. Make sure you're on our newsletter, so you're going to get some of the updates in the coming days. But we're very excited for those who will go with us. We should do something like this again.
Absolutely. I would like to just say one thing, which is all of the questions and the answers have been very general. Like what is able to ask? Oh, what are you trying to focus on? Or what is your job? Or anything like that. And the live experience really is about making it a lot more personal and being able to ask those questions and come to like really concise action points as well, and really hitting the nail on the head versus a broad stroke answer, because we can't see the context. So anyone who's watching this, please remember that. And that is really what we're doing with a live experience, is making it a lot more personal.
Each away with a sort of tailor-made, customized training blueprint specifically for the thing that they care about. And going through that process and building that out, now all of a sudden, I know how to do this for other things that I want to learn as well. I'm so excited about like opening this up to people, because I was someone who had an experience with education where I was good at it and I would get the good grades. Sure, my playtime wasn't interrupted, but I learned so much just in pursuing my own interests and following the sort of scent of my own curiosity, and that has opened up so many doors for me. And when you see yourself able to learn something, when you can look towards the future and say, yes, I could build that skill, download that kung fu, then it's really inspiring, and it engenders a lot of confidence. So I really want people to have that, especially during a time where there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of people, might be considering changing careers or trying to advance their career or trying to get greater, become more established, whatever it may be. I think this is one of those skills that you can't really make a poor investment when it comes to learning, because it's applicable across like whatever the content. So
without a doubt.
Great. Well, Justin, wonderful. We're going to have more great stuff flowing out. Justin has published a lot of articles recently. If you go to highexistence.com/learning-collection, you can see some podcast appearances if you want to listen more. I can also see the articles that he's written. A video on reading that he did with John Brooks. Justin's becoming quite the star over at High Existence. So great to have you on. Justin, we'll talk again soon.
It's absolutely a pleasure. Appreciate it. Take care.